But first, thanks for I know you've been here before, but thanks for coming this morning. Any campaign, you've got two options with a campaign in the real world. Anyone can protest, and it's quite easy to protest. Protests don't win; you need a strategy. And that's, in any campaign, that's a critical decision. Campaigns that protest sometimes have a lot of anger, sometimes have a lot of fun. They fizzle out eventually because they lose. And particularly when you're dealing with not a one-off in one location, then that becomes far more significant as well. And there isn't much of a national debate. It's true. There's very little national debate, but there's very little debate. And so this won't be won by force of numbers, is my advice. And I always give people my advice. Everyone's free to ignore it. That doesn't bother me. But I always tell people what I think. I don't tell people what they want to hear. That goes for individuals or groups. There is no question in my mind that there are two critical issues that could stop us. One is a change in government policy. There won't be a change in government policy at the moment. There is no possibility. In fact, quite the opposite. The government's view is it is nearly as hard as it was previously. It's not quite as hard as it was under Cameron and Osborne. It's a bit softer, but their basic view, their logic is, it goes like this. We want to be economically secure. The big problem being economically secure is energy. Therefore what we want is UK-based energy. That in essence is the government policy. And they obviously see gas as a critical part of that, because they're convinced by what they've seen from the United States in terms of the perceived economics there. There are quite some differences. Our economy and the United States economy energy-wise are not the same. So there's a fundamental economic flaw in their logic. But what it means is there's almost and there's a level of contradiction as well. Because what was happening before was, it actually started earlier than then. It started with Gordon Brown, though he doesn't seem to have ever told anyone or taken any credit for it. But his biggest achievement by far was the incentivising for offshore wind, which has been huge. We're the biggest offshore wind producers in the world, we being England. Scotland really doesn't have any. Scotland's got far more potential, has refused to have any. We produce a third of the entire international offshore energy in the world off the coast of England, and it's still in its infancy. The potential just from that remains huge. If you incorporated Scotland, you could certainly triple that. It's more expensive. Unless you do it the way I do it, which would be on small islands that are uninhabited, which is very cheap. But it more than triples it, and that alters the economics, it alters the balance of payments dramatically. So the government's basic mantra It's actually quite similar to the mantra that I've prattled on about for 15 years, which is we don't want to be reliant on Russian gas and Chinese coal in the future, because for any definition of security, that's bad news. Supply could be cut off, and it's bad economics because it costs a lot and the price will keep going up. That in essence is the government's mantra, but they're coming at it from an entirely different perspective and thinking, here's a cheap and easy way of getting in there. That in essence is what's going on. So I think, obviously I've not heard from every individual, I've never heard email, I've not spoken, but I know the general arguments put here have been environmental. Government doesn't give a damn about the environmental arguments. My critical arguments have been economic, and it is my view strongly that when it comes to I'm not talking about the general discussion about the environment overall, I'm talking about fracked gas in England with iGas and any other technology. It is the economic arguments that are critical, because the economics are bad. And if I could leave, so I'm not leaving, but if I could leave in your mind one particular thought for you to understand, you have to ask yourself, why have they chosen this site? There is in Bassett Law alone 100,000 possible sites. They haven't chosen this site because it's particularly technically easier than the other. The reason is because all to do with the economics. So the economics are not good. That's why they've chosen this site. That's why they've chosen the site at Mizzen. It's next to a main road. And if you think about it, rationally, that's not very clever. If you're trying to put something in that's unpopular, you don't put it next to a main road. You hide it away. So people don't tend to try and build incinerators next to main roads. It just doesn't happen. So the incinerator that we stopped in Elksley was very tucked away, to be honest. You put things that people don't want, you put waste sites as far away as you can. So with fracked gas and iGas, the logic would be that you would put this in the middle of a field, and if you looked at an aerial map of Bassett Law, you would put it somewhere towards the north, kind of 4 or 5 miles from Mizzen, in a field. That's where you put it. And anyone wanted it, first of all, there'd be no one living nearby, or virtually nobody, possibly nobody. Secondly, no one would be able to find it easily. Thirdly, if you wanted to protest outside, you'd have quite a long walk to get there every time. Now, the reason they don't do that is because the economics are not good, and this is what's critical. The reason this is here is it's cheap and cheerful. Lorry in, lorry out main road exists. This main road goes to the A1. There are no legal highways impediments to moving their lorries. There's a few, there are some problems for them. It's not perfect. Mizzen's even better from that point of view. Straight in, straight out. So they're picking sides that initially are irrational, but actually it's because the economics are so weak. They're not making money. They're not getting investment. And that is the big issue that can stop them, is the economics. Now, how can your tactics affect that? Anything that makes it more expensive makes it less likely it can happen. They're doing this speculatively on not low margins but negative margins. And they're doing it at a time, some of you, all of you, may not like it, when Britain's building nuclear power.
Why?
Well, why? For precisely the same reason. To do with, well, whether you think we need it or not, I'm just explaining. It's a separate argument, the environmental argument, but the reason that's exactly the same reason, to be self-sufficient in energy as much as possible for security reasons.
Oh, shit for gas would be better then, wouldn't it?
Excuse me, who's speaking?
I'm just trying to explain, you know, it's always the case, see, and it's also part of my strong advice. You can have a political argument all day long, I do, but that won't win. That's the point of having a strategy and tactics to go with the strategy, and the difference between a protest and winning a campaign. And it's a huge difference. I'm not just talking about this issue, any issue. It's a fundamental difference. You want to stop housing development, anyone can protest. That doesn't stop it. If you have effective strategy with good tactics behind it, then you can actually win a campaign. Now, if my view was it's purely about the campaign, then you might as well target the campaign purely against the government. Because government policy lies at the heart of that, and your best chance of changing policy overall is in relation to government and having a different government. That's quite straight. My point is very straightforward. but that isn't going to, in my view, be sufficient, because there isn't. A change of policy could come through with that, but if the government collapses tomorrow, yeah, that could happen. But even with that, you know, iGas has got some very strong allies. GMB Union, Unite the Union, two biggest manufacturing industrial unions, strongly in favour. Strongly in favour.
United against it. Len McCluskey spoke at the Chesterfield May Day rally and he condemned the fracking industry. There's only GMB is the only major union.
Well, yeah, and I meet him regularly and his officials, and we'll see, because it's not successful at the moment. That's part of the point, that it's not successful. Right? If there's a load of jobs already created, what will happen is iGas will do union recognition deals straight away. So that is not straightforward. As I say, anyone can protest, but when it comes to, it's a different. So I'm not. I think if there was we got in policy in the Labour manifesto. If you look at the number of people who voted and have voted against fracking in Parliament over the years and who they are, you're talking about 50 people. You're not talking about 250 people, 350 people. Right? That's a fact. If you look at who signed my motion in Parliament, you're not talking 50 people. Right now, my point is, you have to always be real if you're going to win a campaign. And the reason for that, the absolute reason for that, is because most people are not convinced by the arguments against. That's the real reason. They're not convinced by the arguments for, but they're not convinced by the arguments against, and they're thinking, is this worse than having, in Scotland for example, discussion and in Wales about a second and third nuclear power station? Part of the argument being used there by some people, let's have more gas. Let's use gas, let's not use nuclear. So that's where there needs to be an element of real strategic thought. To win here, admism doesn't win nationally. You don't have the power to win nationally. You have the power to win here. But because of the economics, they are struggling. They are really struggling. Here they've got some big disadvantages. Number one, water. Water's very expensive here. And there is the risk to the water supply exists. scientists will all say it's a very, very low risk, but it's a high critical risk. In other words, it's not a big risk, but it will happen. If it does, it has a big criticality. And that worries insurers. That worries their insurers. Therefore, insurance is finance. If you're investing, £100 million, £200 million in iGas here and around here, that's part of the risk. So you could lose all your money, very easily. And so the cost of water is a critical argument we've got here. If they're able to get a deal on water abstraction, I'd say they're a third of the way there.
There is a borehole at the rails, just up there.
Yes, but they're not allowed to act, they have to buy rights. And buying rights is not straightforward, and it's not automatic that they transfer. Now, your arguments have been very good. Our arguments, including the ones I have put, where we are weak, they're not strong enough on the water case. The water case is an economic case as well as an environmental one. The case, and the technical case, if you like, for not allowing them to transfer someone else's water extraction license, buy it out, which requires a decision, not just a purchase, is a very, very big one. And the real argument is what that water could be used for by other people who might need it. Farmers or whoever else, who might not want it at this moment, or other industries who might want it. It would be really controversial, because it's a real example. One of the people who managed to get a deal that was agreed some 15 years ago was the mushroom farm at Mann. They need water. That's in direct competition with iGas. Direct. Same water. So I think it's possible to block them getting any water abstraction from Nottinghamshire. That changes the economics dramatically. Because think about it, the possibility to get frack gas in half of England. If you've got to tanker your water in, it's hugely expensive. Similarly, what you do with waste. So again, most of the arguments I've seen put are about the dangers of waste. Plenty of bad American examples that could be cited. But the counter to that that's always put here is, well, our environmental standards are quite different. Here's how to be handled. And they're for inspection. There is a good, and the health and safety system in this country is good. As good as anywhere in the world. So you're not going to win with government, and you're probably not going to win with financial investors either on that argument, because that's clear cut for people to see. However, the cost of doing it and moving it is huge. There's a separate argument that's also could cost them dramatically, and that's one that ought to be urgent. I mean, it's complex. I'll try and give you the facts without overcomplicating it and get them right. And that's about lorry movements. So you can't simply have lorry movements. It's not as straightforward as that. Part of the planning system relates to lorry movements, but in particular, the county council is responsible for highways, cars, lorry movements. It's also responsible for aggregates. It has a statutory duty for aggregates. It has to find land for various aggregates by law. It has no choice. All of those aggregates, virtually more than 90%, are in Basildon. And they are just here, and they're in Mizzen. Not all, there's also Sturton. Basically, it's three areas, three big areas. Digging stuff out, different types of stuff. And that's for the next 20, 25 years. Now, that, I say it's not complex, the timescales are complex, because they messed up their consultations. But you've got some big quarries coming here. We have. Some very big quarries. And the chances of stopping, there's been some opposition, and we got one of them moved further away from people's houses, but the chances of stopping that are virtually nil. The law's quite straightforward. You can dig aggregates out. And that's kind of been passed, but the final bits haven't been totally approved. This is the complex for building materials, yeah. But that's no. This is 25 years of digging out aggregates. This is tarmac and big quarries. I mean, the Idle Valley as was filled in, but it is the restrictions on lorry movements that go with that is a big card here. Because you can only, you see, basically there has to be agreement on which lorries will move down which roads where. That's a legal right that has to be there. Now it contradicts, but it conflicts and it compromises all of that. Because in essence, what everyone wants to do is use the same road. You've got a quarry, biggest quarry down towards Retford, by far the biggest. Up here, down here, A1. All the aggregates move north, all of them, from here. So you're talking about lorry. Now, if you live immediately locally, it's a double hit then, because it potentially, particularly if you live in Blythe, you could have a load of aggregates lorries and lorries from here. But that allows all sorts of possibilities to be messing around to demand more expenditure. Strengthening bridges, improving junctions, using the law to make it more expensive. For the aggregates people, they'll bear that because they have no choice. If you're digging, you've got a licence for a certain kind of stone, you can't shift to somewhere else. You're digging for 25 years, you do what you're told. You pay for what you might argue, might go to court, but in essence, you pay for what you're told to pay for to get your stuff out. That alters the economics here as well, because that gets very expensive. And they can't get, and I know some of you have looked at their accounts, etc. They're struggling on investors. They're struggling on investors, not because of environmental arguments, but because of price, cost, profit. You make their profit margins lower, their chance of coming here is dramatically lower. So water and lorries are by far and away the biggest cards. I'm not suggesting people should not be putting the environmental arguments, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that at all. What I'm saying is, if you think you're going to win this on the environmental arguments with this government in, you are being overly optimistic. And as a campaign strategy, that becomes purely a protest that is not going to win.
Wouldn't you say the louder a voice is, the more likely to be heard?
I think the more, when I say the louder, the more effective, the more people, the more targeted. If the entirety of 4 or 5 local villages in relation to this demanded gold-plated systems in relation to lorry movements, that's big league. That's cost. What's gold-plated? Let me give a really simple example. No lorry movements between 6 at night and 6 in the morning. As an example. For these people, that's incredibly bad news. Now you think they're moving in water at certain times. If they've got to, and put at a really base level, they're not expecting to employ someone purely to sit on the logistics of at what time does water arrive and leave. They're not going to be paying £30,000–40,000 for someone to do that. If they have to do that on one side, just that little thing, every year, it's a lot of money. You start adding up other ways in which they can be forced. That's where it's a bit like stopping a builder doing something you don't want. Every bat survey, every bird survey, every delay, for technical legal reason, very good environmental, wildlife, I'm very positive on all that happening regardless, and not just here. But those items also cost them. It's not just about the principle, which is important, it costs them. And I'm just telling you, if you don't have in your head all the time what costs them, actually costs them. So if you're trying to convert a barn, if you've got to do repeat bat surveys and then put in I'll give you an example, not obviously related to Langold School when the Shore Start Children's Centre went there. Delayed for a year because of bats. A year. Huge extra cost to shift half his bats. Huge extra cost. So someone in the community was on top of the law, was on top of how to do a bat survey professionally, did one, had it validated, put it in, they are bats, here's where they live, here's where they need to go. That no one's dared actually put the price on that, because it came from, you know, council, county council, taxpayer, but it was a lot of money. Now those powers, a bit like you find a slow worm, a development stops, full stop, stops. Because the difficulties of moving are so prodigious, you can be there 5 years. Those arguments are very, very powerful. That's what happened at Loud. When they backed down in Loud, the technical arguments were making it so expensive. Again, they picked a stupid side, more stupid than this, because we could put all sorts of additional issues in. But those technical arguments, the reason that they ended up in reality running away from there, when they'd got their initial planning approval without anyone noticing, well, I didn't notice, and there was no campaign, no one else seemed to notice. Not quite true that no one did, but no one got told. So they were halfway there straight away. They had no fight at the beginning. The costs were prodigious, and it was very easy to build them up, and that's why. Yeah, and also, you've got to think of the other thing. You've got to think of the cost to who on the battles that are fought. It's very easy protest of this nature to create lots of costs for the taxpayer. So to cause costs and problems for the police. Now, you may think that's a good thing, a bad thing to do, but that doesn't affect the bottom line in the slightest of the fracker. What you must always have in focus is who you're trying to be. And the danger is, with all environmental campaigns, is it's very easy to get sidelined into side battles. Well, if you're an iGas strategist, you love that. You love that. And indeed, if you'll find ways of encouraging that, you'll do it. In other words, you go have a battle with everybody else, well, they just get on. So rather than have to be trying to work out some complications on how on earth they're going to try and move lorries and problems with that, or how they're going to get the water, you know, everyone's battling about, you know, something else is going on. That to me says protest, but not winning, which is easy to do. Not easy personally to do, but as a campaign it's easy to do. And they are not. Why do you think they're coming here still and not going elsewhere? Why do you think they've not put other sites in? And they're throwing in their red herrings. I've had more correspondence on Clumber Park than on here. Now, why do you think Clumber Park has emerged? Do you really think there's going to be fracking on Clumber Park, which technically is very simple to stop? It's a democratic process, be easy to win with the National Trust, really easy. Do you think there's going to be fracking on Clumber Park? Because I don't. Why are you going to pick a piece of land where the public can influence the owner directly, as opposed to 1,000 pieces of land that you can buy? The answer is you're not. That is distraction strategy by them.
Sorry, I was just going to say, but we have on record Tom Pickering saying he will frack beneath Sherwood Forest. I have that recorded myself.
That's exactly my point. Of course you do. It's called distraction. It's distraction politics. Ineos are employing some very expensive PR consultants, but they're not doing PR in the normal way. They would love to spend the next 2 years battling over Sherwood Forest, Clumber Park, but they have no intention of going there. No intention. Yeah, 20 years down, if they've got 100 frack sites in the north of Nottinghamshire, might they attempt to go there? Yes, they might well. Yes. Are they going to go there in the next 5-10 years? No, they're not, because they're going to go to cheap sites where they can get it. There'll be no. Some farmers will say no, landowners. Some will say yes. There's some big ones who will say yes. Some big ones. I mean, I don't want to, because I'm not privy to those discussions. I can put good guesses on which big landowners will have said, you prove the technology, how many sites do you want? Put it like this, 3/4 of Bassetlaw is owned by 2 people. 3/4. And we're the size of Greater London. We're the size of Greater London. Very, very easy indeed. So they are buildings, that's precisely why they're doing that. And I'm not saying that you should ignore them, and but I think they should be challenged. But beware of getting sidelined and how much time and effort you put. So I come back to, I've had more correspondence of the Clumber Sherwood Forest than over here. That means that their PR strategy is working. It's working. I can spend a lot of time meeting the National Trust and going through the technical land ownership in Sherwood Forest, and being able to go back to them and say, you can't do it though. These people are not going to agree. And pop a bot down. Not very easy, very possible to do. And meanwhile, they'll have slipped in another deal with somebody else, and suddenly, I'm surprised. I think it's purely money. They've not done 20 sites simultaneously. If I was them, I'd do 20 sites simultaneously, like this. And you don't actually know which one they're really going to go for first. Nobody does. And all deals, and of course the deals will be, they'll be paying a rental. If we start production, you get your big money. Standard developmental clauses. So there's a pot of gold there, as long as we can prove it.
Just a quick question. Why has there been no real activity in this industry for the last 3 or 4 weeks? Have you any idea about that?
Fast drift. I have no idea.
Scotland or any?
It's not to do with policy. It's all. I mean, occasionally it can be, but there's nothing going on that's delaying or prohibiting. It's you're dealing with. While they've got lots of money, this is a small operation. This is a small operation. Ratcliffe behind it, he's not going to risk his fortune pouring it down something that isn't going to work. He isn't. Right? He's a hard-nosed, very hard-nosed. Yeah, but he's a businessman. He's a businessman. It's a bit like Rupert Murdoch and newspapers. If newspapers making no money, he's not interested in the newspaper. Full stop. End of story. End of story. So and that's how Ratcliffe thinks. He doesn't have a principle in favour of fracking. He's a principle in favour of making money.
He doesn't have any principle.
No, but it's about making money. And the government says, yes, you can do it. Here's a possibility, big possibility. Right, well, I'll be the one who delivers that. That makes him more dangerous, much more dangerous. He's not like Quadrilla. He's not. I mean, frankly, you put up a hard fight here with lots of good ground that make this uneconomic. The victory will be to shift someone else in the country. That's the reality.
It's not victory, though, is it? Shift someone else in the country.
Well, no, but the victory. The victory is to show that there's a big victory in terms of impacting policy as well. The big victory in what tactics can be and winning, but the victory in government policy is if it's uneconomic. The government isn't doing this. There is a bit of Osborne in particular bullshit about how it's better to use gas, which is easy to counter. Say, well, fine, we'll just import it in. We'll have a lot of Libyan gas, thank you very much, or Russian gas, if that's the case. Because that's yes, but we want national security. Well, all right, well, we'll do something else instead. It's the government, your money, balance of payments. The government's not ideologically saying frack gas is better. It's saying this is no worse than anything else.
So and what about the?
You'd be wrong to misjudge that. So they're not. Some of them tried to put this was more environmentally friendly. Drop that. Neutral is their position. They technically don't care. They're saying this is no different.
What about the recently highlighted dangers of fracking in former coal mining areas, which Kevin Barron's got particular concerns about?
Yeah, and there's a report. And I've tabled a motion on that, saying it should be. That's a tactic in a campaign.
Do you think there's mileage in that for us?
There might be. Is everyone here reliable? We've not got an Ineos.
No, but you're being recorded and filmed.
And they can lip read as well.
If you wish to speak in the read out about matters, do so.
Yeah.
Or turn you, we can go the other side of you.
Yeah, I think that would be. Sorry, yes, sorry, I'm happy to do it however you would do it.
That's one you mentioned about like hitting with the water, coming in, sticking on time, and stuff like that.
I'm not the problem. I think no, they've gone for sites that's cheap and cheerful by main roads. They've gone for more problematic sites because they don't have the money. They're not going to lay a 5-mile road temporarily to access in the middle of a field, crossing a couple of rivers or streams.
You wouldn't agree then that Notts County Council would be less enthusiastic about fracking side in Nottingham?
No, not really.
No.
I mean, there's an element of that, but with some of the councillors, but no. The councillors, when they have voted on this, have voted all over the place. Your local councillor here supports it,
So
as an example. So
I looked on
that's a bigger. That's
you started, and that said you voted in favour of it
in favour of.
fracking. It said you were broadly neutral on the issue. This was 2 weeks after you said the election, February 2015, on the registry regarding fracking. But I didn't know about the two votes.
There's only. I mean, there's.
Can I help with that one? I think that particular site, they do report these things. When it comes to it with Kevin Barron from Waller Valley, you have to look at the context of the actual voted on. You know, so if it's do we boil 3 babies or 1, I'll vote for the 1. Oh, you voted for that, have you? You know, so it has to be a bit of the context.
There's only been one big vote on fracking in Parliament.
Yeah.
Only one big vote on it, which was the attempt to basically put a moratorium.
Yeah. And that was yours.
Not a bad. That's my resolution. But no, there was a vote as well.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
But for better or for worse, I voted for that. It was a couple of years ago. I voted for the moratorium. It's about 50 MPs did, and 400 or 550 didn't. You know.
That was the one in February.
Around
There's another vote a week after that, which I think is voted with the government on.
Depends what the vote is.
Yeah, it does depend on the vote, as I'm saying.
Look, there's only been...
There were 2 further votes that could have furthered our cause.
Well, sorry, but you can fall into those distractions. That's simply not true. There's been one vote, one debate on fracking, an actual vote. There's one resolution down at the moment. As it happens, I've put it down. It was one of you who encouraged me by showing me the stuff. I don't know who it was, not memory. I thought this is, and that was on the coal mining issue. It struck me that there might be mileage in that, and that's worth discussing in private.
Could you say one thing to those people who are not going to Red Hearts? Thank you, John, by the way. A lot of that I agree with. The rest is new, which is fantastic, it's brilliant. We're having a regional, we've now got 25 plus groups in this region, which was always the plan. We've now got enough people to actually have a regional meeting. That will be next Saturday in the Wesley Centre in Maltby, only 20 minutes away, from 10 till 1. Please, everybody come so we can discuss all these issues and all the rest, and cut out all the repetition that we're doing, all the duplication, focus on the real issues. So please come next Saturday, Wesley Centre, Maltby, 10 till 1. Free coffee and tea and biscuits.
There we are. John, can I just ask one other thing? One of the biggest issues in Retford at the moment, just down the road, is the amount of police that's been here. To say we've probably got 2 coppers in town at any one time. What's your thoughts on the proportionality of the numbers of police that have been drafted up here for this?
Paid for by government.
Yeah, okay, it's paid for by government. What's your thoughts on it?
Your thoughts? Well, I think that's excessive and not good spending, but we're not going to be able to, it's not a local decision. So the local police have been offered a lot of overtime.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come out of the police budget. I mean, you know, it's a bit like a football match. It's a football match, there'll always be volunteers because it's overtime. And if someone else pays for the overtime, it's going to come out of the budget.
So you say somebody else is paying. Who's paying? Right. Okay.
We are.
Yeah.
We are.
Do you not think because of that, as a local MP, you should be looking to get these guys to contribute to the policing bill? Because one of the big criticisms we have as protesters, and as campaigners, because I am both a protester and a campaigner, is that we are costing huge amounts of money in policing to the local authorities and to the local people. So as a local MP, do you not think you should be putting a message out there?
It is a central government decision.
But it's not something that's said very often in public, is it?
No.
That can certainly be said more.
Yeah.
A central government decision. Some of the people here,
obviously a week or so ago, witnessed 40 police putting in a courtroom. That's what I think most people are like.
That was a rehearsal.
Whatever it was 40 police with a courtroom, and that's what we got. I think that's what people are a bit concerned.
So for those that want to come to the Red Heart, it's the function room upstairs. We'll have a Q&A with John, I think. Yeah, that's it.
Brilliant. Thank you, John.
On in first stall at Broadtree Sports Day at the sports ground here till 5
Give you Andrew. Do you want to bring my car down? Give you a lift down to your car.
No, it's